Good afternoon. I'm also delighted to be asked and thrilled to meet you. I'm kind of new into language debate. So I am an executive coach. I work currently mainly in the UK, but I work with quite a lot of international businesses. For example, I'm just about to start working with a team of 5 Italians and 1 Irish. That's going to be interesting. And that will be in Italy. I work in the UN. I work in really savaged places and have to help people understand how to navigate that. And my background is come from pretty heavy duty commercial background. So I worked in O2, in BT and in the oil sector. But before I get into that, I have a question for you. I am wondering how curious you are. I wonder if you could rate yourself on that. Give yourself a rating of 1 to 10, where 10 is nosy. 1's got to be around the dead. Okay. You all got it? Got it? Yeah? Okay. Now look at your neighbour. And I wonder what their rating is. And I wonder what they're wondering about you. What do you think? How do you see the world? Isn't that what we're about? That's certainly my entry into languages. I don't learn French. I didn't learn French to learn about French. I learned to understand who the French are. And 2 thoughts for you that I want to come back to on this. About curiosity. There are 2 precursors for that. One is confidence, and the secondly is empathy. And I think you have dependencies in your profession on those 2 factors. So let me tell you a little bit about business. When I left university at 20 and went to BP down in London, and within about 2 years was catapulted into international business. So you may remember back in the 90s we had this 1992 was Europe. Well, actually that was Britain's way of saying it, because everybody else was already Europe. We just had to catch up. But for BP this was kind of a big deal. And I was in what's called the downstream side of BP, and we were all about actually aligning our business. So instead of having 12 operating units with all the costs and all the different ways of doing things, we were going to do it one way. Well, imagine a 22-year-old. So the first thing that happens is I'm assigned a German team. Very interesting, okay? I get to know about this, and negotiations are quite an interesting thing to do. So I want to give you a flavour of that. So imagine an agenda. It's a tough agenda. It's a difficult thing to do. Nobody's actually really into it, and they're certainly not about giving up anything. So here's how it went. And before I do this, if I offend anybody in the room because I happen to be archetyping particular nationalities, please forgive me. This is my perception. Let's start off with the Brits. Okay, so the agenda comes out. The Brits start behind the scene. They're in the corridors. They're wheeling and dealing. Before you're even in to the room, they've done the deal. Nobody else knows, but they know their negotiating position. Interesting. What do you learn from that? You learn how to communicate very, very well, and you learn how to focus very, very well. The French. Well, the French. So I'm a Francophile. In order to have a really good negotiation with the French, you basically have to understand why. You don't get off the ground until they understand the philosophe. Okay? It doesn't happen. All right? So actually clarity. It's really important. The Germans, Wolfgang, go from the beginning to the end. Okay, you will deliver through the Germans, but my God, the detail that you have to go through is unbelievable. Okay, great attention to detail in business. Really important lesson. The Dutch seem really laid back. You know, they're kind of hanging out, having a good time. and then they're not. What happened? There is a wall. And you think, right, okay, you go through the negotiation. No, the wall is there. They have a wall. So I learned about forget that way, do it another way, find flexibility. The Greeks, I don't know if we have any Greeks in the room. Do you know, the Greeks have done it. They've just done it all before. The ancient Greeks did it. I mean, and do you know what? They did. So about the age of 24, can you imagine? You think you're going to do something new in the world. Well, you kind of learn that actually there's a lot of humility that you can swallow in, and it will help you enormously in business. And finally, and this isn't everybody that I worked with, the Spanish, I found them incredibly refreshing, Carla, because you get on and do the work, right? Lots and lots and lots and lots of energy. So keep up, get going, and get on with it. A beautiful experience. And to give you some flavour of my linguistic aspects in that, so I lived for about a sort of space of 8 years. I lived for 4 years in France, and I obviously spoke French there. Negotiating in French with the French is really, really important, because otherwise they don't believe you're on your side. When I went to Germany, I spoke English, and the Germans generally spoke German. Now that's kind of interesting, because I didn't have any Latin. I only had the Latin basis, so I didn't have any of the Germanic basis. However, I will come back to how I did that. In Spain, I spoke French and they spoke Spanish, and in the end, I kind of spoke Spanish too. The others, we were all in English. So, a message in there. That was the oil industry. I'm now working. I'm just about to go and work with the Italians. International business is in languages. It just is. Yesterday I heard about a board of a Scottish company, a leading Scottish company in food and drink, who were courting a particular company to buy in South America. Right? The whole of the board and the whole of the executive team learnt Spanish, not just to hello, how are you, to negotiating level, and all of the negotiations were done in Spanish. Now, business is committed to language. It is really, it's a normal thing. It's just normal. We just expect to do it. My MBA, most people had 3 or 4 languages. International businesses in Scotland, Amazon, Gore, Agreco, the oil industry, financial sector, we're just in it. I'm embarrassed that we have not engaged clearly with you. I don't know the history of that, and I do make a public commitment to help in that, because I think there's ways of actually going beyond the normal people who are, the movers and shakers in business. I think there's lots and lots of people who are like me who would just be interested in helping. And I think there's ways in which we can use social media to do that. So I'm up for that. I want to come back to 2 things. One of the things about the language, and particularly French for me, I learnt school at French. I did an O grade in French, and I didn't have a context. I was fine at it. I'm orally very strong, but I didn't have a context for it. And when I went to France, I was in business, and it was the same conversation, the same set of nouns and verbs that you used every day. Right? I learned all of my real French by doing one set, one context, day in, day out, day in, day out. And from that I extended all of the basis of where my negotiation skills were, all of the subtleties around that, all of the social aspects around it, etc. It was really, really helpful for me. So I think that's an interesting thing, and that was why I could do it in Germany. So I don't speak German, but I could tell you a lot about the words of oil in German. Yeah. So The second thing I want to do is come back to this is for me, language is about connecting. It's about connecting with people. And I think if we're thinking about young people and that way in which they connect, I think there are things that you can help young people to connect into language, where they are already confident, where they are already empathetic with one another and other people of their age. I think we saw some examples of that, like music. But for me, there's about 5 topics that kids really get into: sport, music, film, computing games, and social media. And I think if you were to work, and I commit in the business side to work on these, because I can think of 3, when we're actually leading in Scotland in some computer gaming. We have a huge music industry out of Glasgow, right, and all the rock industry. Sport, I mean, we're sports nuts here. I mean, football, and there are sports educational sort of trusts around that would be quite into this. But working with kids where they are already confident, where they've already got that connection on empathy, might actually help us move it more into mainstream. A thought for you. So I wonder how curious I leave you. Thank you.